It was supposed to be just another quiet day at Buckingham Palace, the kind of day the public barely notices. But inside those gilded walls, a storm was raging, a storm that would shake the very foundations of the monarchy. King Charles, long considered the measured, patient heir, had reached the end of his tether. Across the Atlantic, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the couple who had captivated the world with their fairy tale romance and later scandalous departures, had just made claims that could not be ignored. They said Meghan had been bullied by her own family, by the institution she once vowed to serve. And the response from Charles? Furious, uncompromising, a response that would change everything. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Ask yourself this: what do you do when someone publicly attacks your family, your legacy, your very life's work? Do you fight back? Do you ignore it? Or do you strike so decisively that the world watches in stunned silence? For Charles, the answer had become crystal clear. The moment he heard the allegations, something inside him snapped. Years of quiet patience, of diplomatic smiles and careful words, evaporated in an instant. And make no mistake, this was not just about hurt feelings. This was about power, about the throne, about a family divided in ways that had never been seen in modern history. Now, imagine the scene. The king, in his private chambers, pacing back and forth. Advisors quietly hovering in the corners, their expressions a mixture of concern and apprehension. The words of Harry and Meghan echoing in his mind. The claims, the accusations, the insinuations of cruelty. Every loyalist, every family member, every palace staffer knew this was a defining moment. And if Charles's next move was misjudged, the repercussions could be catastrophic, not just for him, but for the monarchy itself. But what exactly had Harry said? And why did it provoke a reaction so intense, so immediate, that the palace staff were reportedly left scrambling to contain the fallout? Harry had gone public, in interviews and carefully orchestrated media appearances, stating that Meghan had been subjected to relentless bullying by the royal family during her time as a working member. He painted a picture of isolation, subtle cruelty, and an environment that was anything but welcoming. To the public, this sounded like a revelation. To Charles, it sounded like a direct attack on everything he had built, on the institution he had sworn to protect. It's easy to dismiss this as mere celebrity drama, prince and princess in conflict with their family, but the reality is far more complex. There are rules, protocols, and centuries of tradition at play. There are power dynamics that the average person cannot even begin to comprehend. And at the heart of it, there is one fundamental question. When loyalty and love clash with duty and reputation, which wins? For King Charles, the answer was about to become painfully clear. Reports began trickling in from palace insiders. Charles had summoned Harry and Meghan for a private discussion. The atmosphere was tense, the kind of tension that makes every second feel like an eternity. According to sources, Charles did not mince words. He addressed the allegations directly, dissecting each claim with the precision of someone trained his entire life for scrutiny. The king did not speak in gentle diplomatic tones. There was no, "let's find common ground," or "we need to understand each other." There was a cold, sharp clarity, a declaration that lines had been crossed and consequences would follow. But here's where it gets even more dramatic. The meeting itself was reportedly fraught with emotion. Harry, the prince who had once been adored for his rebellious charm, now stood in front of his father, trying to defend his wife, trying to justify the narrative they had carefully constructed for the public. Meghan, strong and poised as ever, reportedly remained composed, but the tension in the room was palpable. Every word, every glance, carried weight. And the outcome of this meeting, insiders say, was nothing short of explosive. Why does this matter now? Because we are not just watching a family squabble, we are witnessing history in motion. The monarchy, an institution over 1,000 years old, is facing challenges it has never seen in this digital age. Social media amplifies every statement, every accusation, every nuance. Public opinion swings like a pendulum, sometimes loyal, sometimes merciless. And at the center of it all are two of the most talked about figures in the world, and a king who has spent decades building, preserving, and defending the very legacy now under attack. Think about the irony here. The very couple who left the UK, who sought independence and freedom from royal duties, is now pulling the family back into a storm. Their claims, intended to vindicate Meghan and challenge public perceptions, instead triggered a royal reckoning. Charles was forced to act, not just to defend Meghan or Harry, but to defend the monarchy itself. And as insiders reveal, the king's decision was monumental, a declaration that some say signals the end of a chapter in the royal saga. Now, imagine the weight of this moment. The public eagerly waits for details. Tabloids spin their narratives, social media explodes with speculation, and everyone asks the same question. What exactly did Charles say? What consequences await Harry and Meghan? The palace walls, historically silent on many scandals, now tremble with anticipation. And as you watch this story unfold, it's crucial to remember, the twists are far from over. The truth is often stranger, more shocking, and far more consequential than anyone outside those walls could imagine. In the coming chapters, we will explore the drama in detail. We will examine Harry's allegations, Meghan's perspective, the king's private fury, the bombshell meeting, the alleged ultimatum, and the fallout that continues to reverberate around the world. You will see contradictions, unexpected alliances, shocking betrayals, and emotional revelations that even the most loyal royal watchers never predicted. And by the end, you may be left questioning everything you thought you knew about this family, their relationships, and the crown itself. So stay with me, because this is not just a story of conflict. It is a story of power, legacy, and the human emotions that drive even the most disciplined monarchs. And while Harry and Meghan's narrative captivated millions, it was King Charles's response that would truly define the moment. It all began with a statement that sent shockwaves through the world. Prince Harry, the royal who had once been celebrated as the rebellious, charming younger son of Princess Diana, had decided to speak. And when he did not hold back. His allegations against the institution he was born into, and against the very family he had once called home, were as explosive as they were unprecedented. He claimed that his wife, Meghan Markle, had been bullied during her time as a working member of the royal family. To millions of people around the globe, these words were startling. But to those who knew the inner workings of the monarchy, they were potentially catastrophic. Harry's allegations were not casual remarks. They were meticulously framed in interviews, public appearances, and media statements. He painted a vivid picture of a toxic environment, where subtle slights, cold shoulders, and whispers behind closed doors created a climate of fear and isolation. Meghan, according to Harry, had been targeted repeatedly, subjected to both overt and covert forms of cruelty, and left emotionally drained by the constant pressure. To the public, this sounded like a story ripped from a drama series. But beneath the surface, the story was much more nuanced, complicated by decades of tradition, expectations, and unspoken rules. It is important to understand the context. The British monarchy is not just a family. It is an institution steeped in history, duty, and public scrutiny. Every action, every word, every public gesture is observed and analyzed. For Meghan, an American with a background in acting, navigating this world was never going to be simple. She stepped into a culture that valued discretion over expression, tradition over personal freedom, and protocol over emotion. According to Harry, it was in this environment that Meghan faced the bullying he described. Small cuts and dismissals that, compounded over time, became a significant source of distress. But the allegations were not just about Meghan's treatment. They were also a reflection of Harry's frustration. He spoke of feeling powerless to protect the woman he loved, of being forced into silence while the world around them misinterpreted events. The prince recounted moments when his concerns were ignored, when his warnings went unheard, and when the institution he had served since childhood seemed to prioritize appearances over the well-being of its members. Every word he spoke was laden with emotion, conveying a mixture of pain, anger, and deep disappointment. Public reaction was immediate and polarized. Social media erupted, with millions weighing in. Some expressed sympathy for Meghan, praising Harry for finally speaking out. Others criticized the couple for publicly airing grievances that they believed should have been handled privately. Newspapers ran headlines that amplified the drama, some framing Harry as a courageous defender, others as a rebellious son betraying his family. In the court of public opinion, there were no neutral spectators. Everyone had a side, and every side had a story. For the palace, however, the allegations were more than just media fodder. They were a challenge to the very foundation of the monarchy. Staffers, advisors, and senior royals watched in concern, knowing that Harry's words had the power to shape public perception, influence media narratives, and potentially destabilize the institution. Charles, in particular, could not ignore the claims. As king, he bore the responsibility of protecting the family's reputation, ensuring the smooth operation of the monarchy, and maintaining public trust. The allegations were a direct affront to that responsibility. One of the most troubling aspects for Charles was the timing and manner in which Harry went public. By choosing to speak through high-profile media channels rather than private discussions, Harry forced the family into a reactive position. There was no chance for mediation or quiet resolution. The world was watching, and the palace had to respond. According to insiders, this approach intensified Charles's fury. The king, who had spent years cultivating patience and diplomacy, suddenly faced a situation where silence could be interpreted as weakness, and measured words could be misconstrued as acceptance of the allegations. Harry's statements also had a ripple effect on other family members. Some sympathized with Meghan, quietly acknowledging that life in the royal spotlight could be unforgiving, especially for someone from outside traditional aristocratic circles. Others felt that the prince had gone too far, that by making such public accusations he had crossed a line, and that the family's private affairs should remain just that, private. These internal divisions only added to the complexity of the situation, creating a tense environment where loyalty, trust, and perception were constantly at odds. The nature of the bullying, as described by Harry, was multi-layered. It included alleged instances of exclusion, subtle mockery, and a lack of support from certain quarters within the family and staff. But more than the specific acts, it was the underlying culture that Harry highlighted. The feeling that Meghan was always being judged, that nothing she did could ever be enough, and that her very presence challenged unspoken norms. To the outside world, these might seem like minor slights. To Harry and Meghan, they were deeply significant, shaping their decisions, emotions, and ultimately, their lives. And yet, while Harry's narrative was compelling, it also contained contradictions and complexities that would later come under scrutiny. Some reports suggested that Meghan had, at times, struggled to adapt to palace protocols, creating friction with staff. Other insiders claimed that Harry himself had moments of frustration and tension, adding layers to the story. These conflicting accounts would fuel debate for years, making it difficult for the public to discern fact from interpretation. It became clear that this was not a simple story of victim and aggressor, but a tangled web of personality, expectation, and circumstance. Despite these complexities, Harry's allegations achieved one undeniable effect. They forced the monarchy to respond. The world was watching, and silence was no longer an option. Advisors urged caution, staffers prepared statements, and Charles, now king, faced the most significant challenge of his early reign. The allegations were not just about personal grievances. They were about the reputation of the crown, the stability of the family, and the perception of the monarchy both at home and abroad. Every word, every action, every decision mattered. In this climate, tension within the palace reached unprecedented levels. Meetings were held, discussions were whispered in private, and advisors debated strategies. Should they respond publicly? Should they confront Harry and Meghan privately? Should they attempt reconciliation or assert authority decisively? The stakes were enormous. One misstep could inflame public opinion, damage the family's credibility, and provide endless fodder for media speculation. And yet, action was necessary. Inaction was not an option. Harry, for his part, remained resolute. In interviews, he emphasized the emotional toll of the alleged bullying on Meghan, describing sleepless nights, anxiety, and moments of despair. He spoke with a mixture of anger and love, painting a portrait of a couple caught between duty and self-preservation. His words were carefully measured to evoke empathy, while maintaining a narrative of truth and integrity. Yet, even as he spoke, the consequences of his allegations began to unfold in ways he may not have anticipated. And here lies the critical point. Harry's allegations, while personal, became a catalyst for a larger confrontation. They set the stage for King Charles's response, which insiders describe as decisive and uncompromising. The meeting that would follow, where father and son confronted each other in private, was unprecedented in scope and intensity. It would involve not only discussions of personal grievances, but also questions of legacy, authority, and the very future of the monarchy. As the public absorbed Harry's statements, the palace prepared for impact. Security protocols were reviewed, advisors were briefed, and messages were carefully crafted. The allegations had changed everything. They had shifted the narrative, forced confrontation, and demanded action. And for Charles, this was more than just a personal matter. It was a test of leadership, judgment, and resolve. The moment the allegations reached him, King Charles felt a surge of emotions he had rarely experienced publicly. Anger, disappointment, disbelief. Each emotion collided with the next, creating a storm inside him that threatened to overwhelm even the composed, measured monarch the world knew. Behind the palace doors, far from the cameras and tabloids, Charles was not just a king defending the institution. He was a father confronting a son who had taken his family's private struggles and turned them into global headlines. And make no mistake, he was furious. Imagine the scene. Charles, pacing in the ornate walls of Buckingham Palace, advisors murmuring cautiously in the background, and courtiers standing silently, unsure whether to intervene or simply observe. The weight of history pressed down on him. For decades, he had prepared for this role, understanding that being king meant balancing tradition, authority, and diplomacy. But this was personal. Harry's allegations were not just a public embarrassment. They were, in Charles's eyes, a challenge to his judgment, his authority, and the very family he had spent his life protecting. Charles's fury was not rooted in stubborn pride alone. It was the betrayal of trust that stung most deeply. He had tried, over the years, to guide his son through the pressures of royal life, to offer advice, support, and understanding. Yet here was Harry, speaking openly to the world, painting a picture that suggested Charles had failed to protect Meghan, failed to act, or worse, been complicit in creating a toxic environment. To Charles, this was intolerable. It was not only a misrepresentation. It was a distortion of the truth, broadcast to millions who had no context for the complexities of palace life. Sources close to the palace described Charles's state during those early hours as volatile. He was reportedly furious, yet calculated, aware that a rash reaction could worsen the situation. Every move was strategic, every word carefully considered, but the underlying anger was undeniable. He was confronting not just a son, but a narrative that threatened to erode the monarchy's credibility, undermine its traditions, and damage its image both domestically and internationally. But Charles's fury was not just reactive. It was also proactive. He began crafting his response, weighing the consequences of each action. Should he meet Harry privately, attempt reconciliation, or make a public statement to reassert authority? Each option carried risks. A private meeting could be seen as weakness if it leaked. A public rebuke could fuel further scandal. And doing nothing was not an option. The allegations had already ignited a media frenzy that would not die down on its own. Insiders have revealed that Charles's fury extended beyond the personal betrayal. It was amplified by frustration at the broader system, at a family under relentless scrutiny, and at the public's tendency to oversimplify complex dynamics. He was acutely aware that public perception often overshadowed reality, and that the royal family's private struggles could be twisted into headlines that sold newspapers and dominated social media. For Charles, this was not just about defending Meghan or himself. It was about defending an entire institution from misrepresentation. As the hours passed, Charles reportedly summoned his closest advisors, seeking counsel on how to handle the situation. But even in these meetings, his anger was palpable. He spoke of the importance of loyalty, of protecting the monarchy's integrity, and of ensuring that the next generation of royals understood the gravity of their words and actions. There was a mix of paternal concern and regal authority in his tone, a message that was equal parts warning and admonition. Charles's fury was also fueled by frustration with the narrative itself. While Harry and Meghan's statements highlighted alleged bullying, they omitted the nuances and complexities of palace life that often explained difficult interactions. The monarch understood that life within the palace was inherently stressful, governed by strict protocols, and subject to intense scrutiny. Missteps could be magnified, intentions misinterpreted, and minor incidents blown out of proportion. In this context, Charles felt that the allegations were unfairly skewed, presenting a one-sided story that ignored the pressures faced by every member of the family. The emotional intensity of Charles's reaction cannot be understated. Sources suggest that he spent hours reflecting on the situation, pacing in his private chambers, and conferring quietly with senior aides. His thoughts were a mixture of anger and sorrow. Anger at the perceived betrayal, sorrow for the family divisions that had widened, and concern for the public perception that could impact the monarchy for years to come. The king's fury was a complex tapestry of emotions, combining the personal, the political, and the historical in a way that few outside the palace could fully understand. But Charles did not allow his anger to become reckless. Unlike a dramatic public outburst, he channeled his fury into strategic thinking. He considered how to confront Harry in a way that would assert authority without causing irreparable damage. He weighed every word, every gesture, knowing that history would judge his response. The king was aware that the eyes of the world were upon him, that journalists, royal watchers, and social media users would dissect every move, every expression, every nuance. There was no room for error. And yet, despite his calculated approach, the emotional core of his response remained undeniable. Charles wanted his son to understand the gravity of the situation, to see that his public statements had consequences, and to recognize the responsibility that comes with being a member of the royal family. He needed Harry to realize that accusations, even if well-intentioned, could have far-reaching impacts on reputation, legacy, and the very institution they both represented. This fury eventually manifested in the private meeting that would later be described by insiders as tense, emotional, and historic. Charles confronted Harry directly, addressing each allegation with a mix of blunt honesty and measured authority. He spoke of loyalty, trust, and the obligations that come with their roles. He reminded Harry of the importance of discretion, of the unseen pressures that each royal faces, and of the damage that public allegations can inflict on the family as a whole. Reports suggest that this meeting was not only a clash of personalities, but also a clash of values. Harry, motivated by love and a desire to protect his wife, was determined to highlight what he perceived as injustice. Charles, motivated by duty and the preservation of the monarchy, was determined to assert control, defend the institution, and ensure that boundaries were respected. The room was reportedly charged with emotion, each side struggling to assert their perspective, each word carrying weight far beyond the immediate conversation. What makes this confrontation so compelling is that it was about more than a single incident or claim. It was a test of authority, a negotiation of family loyalty, and a battle for the narrative itself. Charles's fury, while deeply personal, was inseparable from his role as king. The stakes were enormous. One wrong word, one misinterpreted gesture, could inflame an already volatile situation and have consequences that resonated far beyond the palace walls. The tension in the room, according to insiders, reached a boiling point when Charles delivered what has been described as a massive bombshell to Harry. The details of this declaration remain closely guarded, but sources hint that it was a moment that left both father and son stunned, a moment that would ripple through the family and make headlines worldwide. The king's fury, combined with his strategic clarity, set the stage for a confrontation that no one outside those walls could have anticipated. And as the world waited for details to emerge, the palace prepared for the aftermath. Staffers readied statements, advisors briefed key stakeholders, and every move was calculated to maintain order and preserve the monarchy's image. The allegations had ignited a fire, but Charles's response promised to escalate the drama to levels the public had never witnessed. The storm that Harry's allegations unleashed did not stop at Buckingham Palace's doors. It rippled through the entire royal family, exposing tensions, loyalties, and fractures that had been quietly simmering for years. What the public saw as a simple narrative of Meghan being bullied and Harry defending her was only the surface. Beneath that surface lay a network of personal grievances, generational divides, and conflicting loyalties that threatened to pull the family apart. At the center of this divide was the question of allegiance. Some family members quietly sympathized with Meghan, recognizing that life in the royal spotlight could be suffocating, especially for someone who came from outside the aristocratic sphere. They understood that navigating centuries-old protocols while under intense scrutiny from the media and public could leave anyone feeling isolated and unsupported. These sympathizers quietly offered advice, guidance, and emotional support, though always within the strict constraints of palace discretion. Yet, not everyone shared this perspective. Some royals felt betrayed, not just by Harry, but by the narrative itself. To them, airing private grievances publicly was an unacceptable breach of trust. Family disputes were supposed to remain private, resolved behind closed doors, and only rarely hinted at in public statements. By speaking out, Harry had shattered this unspoken code, forcing the family to confront not only the allegations but also the very idea that internal matters could be broadcast to millions worldwide. This divide was not just emotional, it was strategic. Different factions within the royal family began forming almost immediately. Advisors and courtiers quietly aligned themselves with either side, offering guidance, preparing statements, and sometimes attempting to mediate conflicts. The palace, usually a symbol of unity and calm, became a hotbed of speculation, tension, and careful maneuvering. Every conversation, every glance, every whispered comment carried significance. The family was no longer a singular entity. It had become a collection of individuals with differing priorities, perspectives, and loyalties. Charles, of course, was acutely aware of these dynamics. His fury over Harry's allegations was not just about protecting Meghan. It was about maintaining cohesion within the family. A divided family is a vulnerable family, one open to public scrutiny, criticism, and, in the monarch's view, destabilization. Charles recognized that the longer the divisions persisted, the harder it would be to protect the monarchy's image, authority, and legacy. He also understood that reconciliation, if it were possible, would require careful timing, strategy, and, perhaps most importantly, authority. The public, meanwhile, was entirely unaware of the intricacies of these divisions. From the outside, it seemed like a simple battle between Harry and Charles, with Meghan at the center. But insiders knew it was far more complex. Brothers, cousins, aunts, uncles, all were quietly negotiating their positions, balancing personal feelings with the responsibilities and expectations that came with being a member of the royal family. Even small interactions. An unexpected phone call, a subtle gesture at a family gathering, could be interpreted as support, disapproval, or even betrayal. Princess and Prince William and other senior royals reportedly had their own reactions to Harry and Meghan's allegations. Anne, known for her practicality and directness, likely approached the situation analytically, weighing facts over emotions, while William's perspective may have been shaped by both personal loyalty and concern for the family's public image. Each member's response added layers of complexity to the family dynamic, creating a web of conflicting emotions and strategies that only heightened the overall tension. This division was also exacerbated by the media's relentless attention. Every statement, every gesture, every public appearance was scrutinized, analyzed, and interpreted as evidence of factionalism within the royal family. Social media amplified these narratives, creating an echo chamber in which speculation often became accepted as fact. Rumors of disagreements, secret alliances, and internal conflicts circulated widely, further straining relationships and intensifying the sense of division. In private, these divisions manifested in subtle but meaningful ways. Staffers noticed tension during routine interactions, advisors observed carefully chosen words and gestures, and family members reportedly found themselves in difficult positions, forced to choose sides or navigate a delicate balance. The palace, once a symbol of unity and order, had become a stage for unspoken conflicts and quiet maneuvering. Amid this tension, some family members attempted to mediate. They reached out to Harry and Meghan, encouraging dialogue, offering perspective, and trying to find common ground. Others, however, felt that the time for private resolution had passed and that a firm, public stance was necessary to reassert authority and protect the monarchy's reputation. These differing approaches created additional friction as the family struggled to decide how best to respond to a situation that had escalated far beyond anyone's initial expectations. One of the most dramatic aspects of this division was the emotional toll it took on the family. Loyalty, love, and responsibility collided in ways that were intensely personal. For Charles, this was both a professional and a paternal crisis. For other family members, it was a test of allegiance, judgment, and emotional resilience. Even those who were not directly involved felt the weight of the conflict, aware that the family's unity, or lack thereof, would have far-reaching implications. The media, of course, had a field day. Headlines suggested rifts that were deeper than they may have been, while social media users speculated endlessly about alliances, betrayals, and the real story behind the allegations. This public scrutiny only intensified the sense of division, as family members felt pressured not just by personal emotions, but by the need to manage perception, both at home and internationally. Yet, despite the tension, there were moments of quiet reflection and understanding. Some insiders reported that family members took time to consider Harry and Meghan's perspective, acknowledging that their experience, while complex, was genuine. These moments of empathy were rare but significant, highlighting the human dimension of what was otherwise a highly public and politicized conflict. Ultimately, the royal family's division set the stage for an unprecedented confrontation. The allegations had created more than a media spectacle. They had forced a reckoning, both within the family and for the institution itself. Loyalties would be tested, decisions would be scrutinized, and the consequences of every action would reverberate far beyond the palace walls. The stage was set for a showdown between father and son, tradition and rebellion, duty and personal conviction. And as the family grappled with these divisions, it became clear that the story was far from over. What happened behind closed doors, away from the cameras, would shape not just the future of Harry and Meghan, but the very legacy of the monarchy itself. While the world watched Harry speak on behalf of his wife, Meghan Markle's perspective remained largely unseen, obscured by media narratives, public speculation, and the often sensationalized headlines that followed every royal move. Yet insiders reveal that Meghan's experience within the royal family was a mixture of triumphs, challenges, and moments of profound isolation. To understand the full picture, it is essential to step into her shoes, to see the pressures she faced as a working royal, a mother, and an outsider navigating a centuries-old institution with rules that were invisible to most. Meghan arrived in the United Kingdom as a confident, accomplished woman, with a successful acting career and a global profile. She was intelligent, articulate, and socially aware, someone who had spent her life navigating public attention and scrutiny. But the royal family presented an entirely different world, one steeped in centuries of tradition, rigid protocols, and an unspoken hierarchy that governed not just public appearances, but every aspect of daily life. The transition was challenging, and even the most resilient personalities could feel overwhelmed. According to reports, Meghan quickly became aware that she was under constant observation. Staffers monitored her interactions, senior royals scrutinized her decisions, and the media dissected her every word and gesture. Small missteps, whether perceived or real, were amplified and often misrepresented. In interviews, Harry described how Meghan felt unsupported, and insiders confirmed that she struggled to find allies within the palace structure. Isolation, coupled with relentless public scrutiny, created an environment that was difficult to navigate emotionally and mentally. Meghan herself reportedly experienced moments of genuine confusion and frustration as she tried to reconcile the expectations placed upon her with her own values and personality. She sought to modernize aspects of royal protocol, introduce initiatives for social good, and contribute meaningfully to the family's public work. Yet, according to sources, her efforts were sometimes met with resistance, subtle dismissals, or criticism, reinforcing the perception that she did not fit within the institution. For Meghan, these moments were not minor annoyances. They were signals that she was under constant evaluation and that her presence challenged the status quo. Insiders suggest that Meghan's most significant struggles were not always public. They occurred behind the palace doors, in quiet interactions with staff, advisors, and other family members. She reportedly faced subtle slights, whispered criticisms, and an undercurrent of skepticism about her intentions and suitability as a royal. These experiences, compounded over time, created stress and tension that affected not only her public role, but her personal life and well-being. Harry, recognizing the impact, became her advocate, speaking out to defend her when the situation became unbearable. At the heart of Meghan's side of the story was a desire for respect, understanding, and recognition. She was not seeking to dismantle tradition or disrespect the monarchy. She wanted to contribute meaningfully while maintaining her sense of identity and autonomy. The tension arose when these desires clashed with established norms, resulting in conflicts that were often magnified by the media and public scrutiny. Her experience highlighted a broader challenge within the royal family, balancing tradition with modern expectations, duty with personal fulfillment, and protocol with compassion. Meghan's own reflections, shared selectively through interviews and close confidants, reveal a woman acutely aware of the challenges she faced. She described feeling isolated, anxious, and, at times, unsupported, even as she worked tirelessly on charitable initiatives and represented the royal family on the global stage. Her narrative emphasizes the emotional toll of living under constant observation and judgment, where every action was subject to interpretation and where personal struggles became public spectacle. Family dynamics added another layer of complexity. Meghan's integration into the royal family coincided with existing tensions, differing personalities, and generational divides. Navigating these dynamics required not only diplomacy but resilience, patience, and careful attention to every word and gesture. According to insiders, Meghan's natural assertiveness, confidence, and desire to speak out sometimes clashed with palace expectations of silence and conformity. These clashes, though often subtle, contributed to a perception among some that she was difficult or disruptive, an interpretation that would later fuel media narratives and public debate. Yet, Meghan's story is not one of passivity or helplessness. Reports describe her as resourceful, strategic, and deeply committed to her work and family. She sought to establish herself as an equal partner within the monarchy, advocating for causes she believed in and challenging practices she perceived as outdated or unjust. Her efforts, while admirable, were often interpreted through a lens of skepticism, magnifying tensions and creating misunderstandings. It is also essential to recognize the emotional toll on Meghan. The pressures of royal life, combined with public scrutiny and internal resistance, reportedly contributed to periods of stress and anxiety. She faced criticism not only from the media and public, but sometimes from those within the palace who were unsure how to respond to her directness and modern approach. These experiences reinforced her sense of isolation and underscored the challenges of integrating into an institution with rigid expectations and unspoken rules. Harry's advocacy for Meghan, while deeply rooted in love and loyalty, brought its own challenges. By speaking publicly about her treatment, he amplified her voice but also intensified scrutiny. The allegations became a double-edged sword, raising awareness and garnering sympathy while simultaneously creating tension with the rest of the family and the monarchy's advisors. Meghan's side of the story, while compelling, existed within a highly charged environment where emotions, perception, and media narratives collided in unpredictable ways. Insiders also reveal moments of strength and resilience. Meghan reportedly found support among select staffers and allies who appreciated her authenticity, intelligence, and dedication. These relationships provided some relief amid the constant scrutiny and helped her navigate the complexities of royal life. Yet, even these alliances were fragile, subject to the shifting dynamics of loyalty, perception, and institutional pressure. One of the most critical aspects of Meghan's experience was her awareness of the broader implications of her actions and her public image. She understood that every move, every word, and every interview would be scrutinized, analyzed, and often misinterpreted. She also recognized that her narrative had the power to influence public perception, shape conversations about the monarchy, and impact her family. This awareness heightened the stakes, making each interaction more consequential and each decision more carefully considered. Ultimately, Meghan's side of the story underscores a central tension: the clash between individual agency and institutional expectation. She sought to assert her identity, contribute meaningfully, and protect her well-being, while the monarchy demanded conformity, discretion, and adherence to long-standing protocols. The resulting friction, combined with media amplification and Harry's public defense, created a perfect storm, one that would challenge family relationships, test loyalty, and provoke a response from King Charles that insiders describe as decisive and unprecedented. And as the world would soon witness, Meghan's story, though deeply personal, was now inseparable from the monarchy's future. The questions raised by her experience about loyalty, tradition, identity, and power would become central to the unfolding drama. And while Harry had spoken first, it was King Charles's response that would set the stage for a confrontation that no one outside the palace could have predicted. Once Harry and Meghan's allegations entered the public domain, there was no turning back. The media, always vigilant and voracious when it came to royal news, pounced immediately. Headlines splashed across newspapers, websites, and social media platforms, each one competing for attention, clicks, and engagement. Every word, every nuance, every gesture made by the couple, or anyone remotely connected to them, was analyzed, interpreted, and amplified. The storm had begun, and it showed no signs of slowing. The first wave of coverage framed Harry and Meghan as victims of a rigid, sometimes cold, royal system. Articles highlighted Meghan's alleged struggles with palace staff, the pressure of tradition, and the relentless scrutiny she endured from the media itself. Social media users expressed overwhelming sympathy for the couple, often drawing parallels to Harry's mother, Princess Diana, whose own struggles with the press and palace politics were well documented. Memes, hashtags, and viral commentary exploded online, shaping the narrative in real time and creating a sense of global solidarity around the couple. Yet, the media landscape was far from uniform. While some outlets presented the story with empathy and nuance, others sensationalized the conflict, turning it into a dramatic spectacle. Headlines exaggerated tensions, speculated on hidden motivations, and painted the royal family as fractured and dysfunctional. Every minor incident was magnified: a raised eyebrow, a carefully chosen outfit, a brief public appearance, becoming fodder for speculation about alliances, betrayals, and the real story behind the headlines. The international response was equally intense. Media outlets in the United States, Canada, Australia, and beyond followed every development, often framing the story in cultural terms that resonated with their own audiences. In many ways, Harry and Meghan's narrative became a global phenomenon, transcending the boundaries of the British monarchy and becoming a topic of conversation in living rooms, online forums, and workplaces worldwide. Analysts debated whether the couple were courageous truth-tellers or reckless disruptors, while the public's divided opinion mirrored the polarization of the media itself. The palace, predictably, was unprepared for the magnitude of the media storm. Staffers scrambled to craft official statements, anticipate leaks, and manage the narrative without drawing additional attention. Advisors debated whether silence, measured responses, or carefully timed interventions would be most effective. Each decision carried enormous risk. A statement could inflame tensions, while an action could be interpreted as tacit agreement with the allegations. The delicate balance between transparency, discretion, and control became an immediate challenge. Social media added an entirely new dimension to the crisis. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok amplified every perspective, enabling ordinary users to participate in the conversation on a massive scale. Viral posts, opinion threads, and commentary videos spread faster than any official statement could, creating an environment in which perception often overshadowed fact. The palace had to contend not only with journalists, but with millions of engaged, vocal individuals whose opinions were shaping the broader narrative. One particularly striking aspect of the media storm was the emergence of what insiders call narrative echo chambers. Outlets sympathetic to Harry and Meghan emphasized alleged mistreatment, systemic bias, and emotional struggles, while critics focused on breaches of protocol, perceived entitlement, and public relations tactics. These parallel narratives created confusion among audiences, reinforced polarization, and fueled endless speculation about what had truly happened behind closed doors. Even well-intentioned reporting often contributed to misunderstanding, as facts were contextualized differently depending on the outlet's editorial stance. The tabloids, of course, were relentless. British tabloids, in particular, thrived on scandal, sensationalism, and controversy. Every report, no matter how minor, was framed as evidence of dysfunction, betrayal, or intrigue. Insider sources were quoted, some credible, some dubious, adding layers of mystery and drama. Photographs of Harry and Meghan, often taken out of context, were dissected and analyzed for hidden meaning, feeding speculation about mood, tension, and intention. The result was a narrative that was as much performance as truth, a story crafted to keep audiences engaged while shaping perception in subtle, powerful ways. For the royal family, the media storm was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it brought global attention to the allegations, increasing pressure to respond decisively. On the other, it risked distorting reality, inflaming tensions, and turning private family matters into public spectacle. Every public statement had to be meticulously crafted, balancing honesty with diplomacy, empathy with authority. One poorly chosen phrase could spark outrage, misinterpretation, or further scandal, while silence could be perceived as weakness or guilt. The stakes could not have been higher. Harry and Meghan, meanwhile, understood the power of the media. Their own team of advisors and public relations specialists worked strategically to ensure that their narrative reached the right audiences, emphasizing fairness, empathy, and advocacy while navigating the inevitable backlash. Every interview, every statement, every public appearance was carefully timed, scripted, and positioned to maximize impact, maintain credibility, and protect their personal brand. They recognized that the media could be both ally and adversary, depending on how stories were framed and interpreted. The media storm also magnified divisions within the royal family. Each statement, public gesture, or appearance was analyzed for indications of allegiance or conflict. Observers scrutinized the interactions between Charles, William, and other senior royals, looking for signs of tension, support, or disapproval. Courtiers reported increased pressure as their own words and actions were dissected for hidden meaning. The palace, traditionally a place of discretion and calm, became a stage for unspoken conflicts and silent battles of influence. One of the most consequential effects of the media storm was its impact on public opinion. Polls indicated that sympathy for Meghan and Harry grew, especially among younger audiences and international viewers, while older, more traditional audiences often expressed skepticism or criticism. This polarization intensified the stakes for the monarchy, as public trust and perception are critical components of royal legitimacy. Every public debate, viral post, and headline had real-world consequences, influencing not just reputations but the broader perception of the institution. Yet, amid the chaos, there were moments of clarity. Certain media outlets sought to present balanced perspectives, emphasizing context, nuance, and historical precedent. Analysts explored the complexities of palace life, the pressures of public service, and the challenges faced by newcomers to the royal family. These pieces, while fewer in number, provided a more complete understanding of the situation, highlighting the interplay between personal experience, institutional expectation, and media representation. The media storm, however, was far from over. Each new development, the release of interviews, the publication of memoir excerpts, leaks from insiders, added fuel to the fire. The world watched as the story evolved in real time, creating anticipation, speculation, and debate that seemed impossible to contain. And while the public consumed every detail, the palace prepared for the next phase. The private confrontation between King Charles and Harry, a meeting that insiders say would determine the future of the family, the monarchy, and the couple's place within it. The storm had demonstrated one undeniable truth. In the digital age, the media is not just a messenger. It is a participant, an amplifier, and sometimes an instigator. Every word, every gesture, every allegation would be interpreted, debated, and remembered. And as the palace braced for the inevitable confrontation, it became clear that Harry and Meghan's narrative had set a chain of events into motion that could not be reversed, only navigated with precision, strategy, and resolve. The stage was set. The media storm had reached its peak. Public opinion was divided, insiders were buzzing, and the palace was under pressure like never before. Yet behind closed doors, something even more intense was about to unfold. A private, unprecedented meeting between King Charles and his son, Prince Harry. This was not a casual conversation. It was a confrontation that insiders later described as tense, emotional, and historic, a meeting that would define relationships, reputations, and the monarchy itself. The atmosphere in the palace was electric. Staffers reported an unusual tension in the air. Advisors were called in to prepare briefings, and courtiers carefully arranged schedules to ensure maximum discretion. Security protocols were heightened. Every detail mattered. The world outside could not see what was happening, but inside those walls, every word, gesture, and silence carried enormous weight. The meeting was more than a private discussion. It was a turning point. Harry entered the room with determination. He was there not just as a prince, but as a husband and protector of his wife. Every allegation he had made publicly was now confronted directly in front of the man at the center of his family, the king himself. Reports suggest that Harry spoke passionately, articulating the struggles Meghan had faced, the isolation she endured, and the emotional toll the royal environment had taken on them both. His words were charged with both love and frustration, conveying a mixture of sincerity, hurt, and indignation. Charles, on the other hand, was a study in controlled fury. While Harry spoke, Charles reportedly listened with a measured demeanor, but the tension beneath the surface was palpable. Every allegation, every claim, was weighed against decades of experience, responsibility, and an acute awareness of public perception. Charles was not just a father listening to his son. He was a monarch confronting a potential threat to his legacy, authority, and the reputation of the institution he had spent his life serving. According to insiders, the meeting began relatively calmly, with Charles acknowledging Harry's concerns but setting clear boundaries. He reportedly emphasized the importance of discretion, loyalty, and family unity. Charles reminded Harry that public allegations carry consequences, not just for those involved, but for the monarchy as a whole. Every word was deliberate, calculated to convey both authority and the gravity of the situation. But the meeting did not remain calm for long. As Harry pressed his case, detailing Meghan's experiences and the emotional impact of palace life, Charles's controlled composure reportedly began to crack. The discussion escalated, with both father and son speaking passionately, emotions running high. It was a rare glimpse behind the palace doors, where hierarchy, protocol, and centuries of tradition collided with human emotion, vulnerability, and familial loyalty. One insider described the turning point of the meeting as the moment Charles delivered what has since been referred to as a massive bombshell. While the full details remain confidential, sources indicate that Charles communicated a firm and uncompromising stance, asserting consequences that would affect both Harry and Meghan's roles and standing within the royal family. The decision was reportedly decisive, leaving little room for negotiation or reinterpretation. For Harry, the revelation was a shock, a moment that underscored the seriousness of the king's resolve and the stakes of their confrontation. The emotional intensity of the meeting was heightened by the intertwining of personal and institutional dynamics. Harry was not just advocating for Meghan. He was defending a vision of family, fairness, and personal dignity. Charles was not just responding as a father. He was acting as the sovereign, responsible for protecting centuries of tradition, maintaining authority, and ensuring the stability of the monarchy. These dual roles created a high-stakes environment where every word, glance, and pause carried multiple layers of meaning. Reports suggest that Meghan's absence from the meeting, while intentional, did not diminish her presence. Harry's arguments were framed around her experiences, her perspective, and her emotional well-being. The king, while addressing Harry directly, was acutely aware that the conversation involved both father-son dynamics and the broader question of Meghan's place in the family and the institution. It was a delicate balance, requiring Charles to navigate personal loyalty, professional responsibility, and public perception simultaneously. Insiders note that the meeting also involved discussions of public narrative. Charles emphasized the importance of managing perception, controlling leaks, and maintaining the integrity of the family's image. He reportedly warned that continued public airing of grievances could have long-term repercussions, both for Harry and Meghan personally and for the monarchy institutionally. This was a strategic component of the confrontation, highlighting Charles's dual role as both father and sovereign. The meeting, while emotionally charged, was not solely confrontational. There were reportedly moments of reflection, understanding, and even empathy. Charles acknowledged some of the pressures Harry and Meghan faced, recognizing that the transition into royal life could be extraordinarily difficult, particularly for someone from outside the traditional aristocratic sphere. Harry, in turn, expressed his desire for reconciliation, for acknowledgement of Meghan's experiences, and for respect of the couple's choices. Yet, despite these moments of understanding, the meeting ultimately culminated in a firm declaration from Charles. Sources describe it as a decisive moment that reasserted the king's authority and set the terms for what would follow. The bombshell reportedly included an ultimatum or a set of boundaries that would fundamentally alter Harry and Meghan's relationship with the royal family. It was a turning point that insiders say left the couple stunned, aware of the seriousness of the consequences and the challenges ahead. This meeting also had wider implications for the palace staff and advisors. Everyone involved recognized that the outcome would influence not just family dynamics, but also public perception, media narratives, and the stability of the monarchy. Preparation, discretion, and strategic planning were essential, as even minor details, timing, phrasing, or tone, could be interpreted in ways that amplified conflict or caused further scandal. The stakes could not have been higher. The fallout from the meeting was immediate in private circles. Advisors began implementing contingency plans, communications teams prepared for media inquiries, and family members adjusted their own positions in anticipation of public reaction. The meeting had resolved some questions but opened others, creating a complex web of anticipation, speculation, and uncertainty. The palace, historically a symbol of control and stability, now faced an internal challenge whose consequences would ripple outward for months, if not years. In the end, the bombshell meeting demonstrated the dual pressures Harry and Charles were under: familial love versus institutional responsibility. It revealed how personal grievances could collide with centuries of protocol and public expectation, creating a scenario that was unprecedented in modern royal history. The conversation, tense and emotional as it was, marked a definitive moment, a moment that would shape the narrative, influence relationships, and set the stage for further conflict and revelation. And as the world continued to watch, both the palace and the couple braced for the next phase of this unfolding drama. The private confrontation had concluded, but the public reckoning had only just begun. The bombshell meeting between King Charles and Prince Harry sent shockwaves throughout the palace, reverberating far beyond the walls of Buckingham. While the discussion had occurred behind closed doors, its impact was immediate, profound, and far-reaching. Emotions were raw, loyalties were tested, and the intricate web of relationships within the royal family became even more fragile. The aftermath of this confrontation would shape the monarchy's trajectory, redefine family dynamics, and set the tone for the global conversation that followed. Inside the palace, the air was thick with tension. Advisors and staffers scrambled to anticipate the consequences of the meeting, drafting statements, adjusting schedules, and monitoring potential leaks. The private confrontation had clarified the king's stance, but it also highlighted the delicate balancing act required to navigate public perception. Every gesture, every word, and every appearance was now scrutinized not only for content, but for underlying meaning. The palace had to move carefully, ensuring that neither Harry nor Charles's positions were misrepresented, while simultaneously preserving the integrity of the monarchy. For Harry and Meghan, the aftermath was a mixture of reflection, frustration, and uncertainty. Sources indicate that Harry left the meeting deeply affected, grappling with the firm stance his father had taken and the consequences it implied. While he had entered the conversation prepared to advocate passionately for his wife, the reality of Charles's response, decisive, uncompromising, and historic, was sobering. Meghan, observing from afar, reportedly felt a mix of vindication and apprehension. The meeting validated her experiences in some ways, but also underscored the challenges they would face in continuing to assert their autonomy while navigating family expectations and public scrutiny. The confrontation also triggered a ripple effect throughout the royal family. Divisions that had previously been subtle or private became more visible as different members aligned themselves with various perspectives. Some sympathized with Harry and Meghan, quietly acknowledging the pressures and isolation they had faced. Others emphasized loyalty to the king and the preservation of tradition, viewing public allegations as a breach of trust and a threat to institutional stability. This internal recalibration created a complex, shifting landscape of relationships, alliances, and tensions that would shape interactions for months to come. Media coverage exploded in response to whispers of the meeting. Although the details were closely guarded, speculation ran rampant. Headlines suggested a dramatic clash between father and son, while social media users dissected every possible interpretation of the confrontation. Analysts debated what Charles's response meant for the monarchy, for Harry and Meghan's public narrative, and for the broader perception of the royal family. The palace faced an unprecedented challenge, managing both the internal emotional fallout and the relentless external scrutiny. One of the most immediate effects of the confrontation was strategic. The king's advisors began reviewing contingency plans for public messaging, engagements, and family interactions.